In the darkest years of World War II, when Europe was drowning in fear and Nazi intelligence seemed untouchable, one man stepped into the heart of danger armed with nothing but lies. Brilliant, calculated, world-shaping lies. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even a trained spy. Yet he walked straight into Berlin, earned Hitler's trust, and played a game of deception so audacious that it rewrote the fate of the war. This is the true story of the invisible man who created an entire network of agents who never existed. The man whose words moved armies, redirected invasions, and left even the most feared intelligence officers blind. A mission so insane, so impossible, that history still struggles to believe it actually happened. What he did, even before a single shot was fired, became one of the greatest strategic victories of the modern world. And it all began with one message sent from the shadows. Before we begin recounting the events of the following war, if you're someone who enjoys history and the stories of soldiers and battles that changed the world, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the events we cover here. And share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever served in the military, or do you wish you could experience what it's like to serve? Your opinions mean a lot to us and help us build a true community of history enthusiasts. Berlin, 1943. The heart of the Nazi regime pulsed with paranoia. Spies were everywhere, or so the Germans believed, but none were as quiet, as invisible, or as astonishingly daring as the man who walked into the city under a stolen uniform. Captain Juan Pujol Garcia, known later by the codename Garbo, was not a trained spy. He was not even a soldier by the time history discovered him. But on this cold spring morning, he was the most important double agent in Europe, though the Germans had no idea they were being outwitted by a man they trusted completely. He had one mission: feed Berlin a lie, so convincing that the fate of D-Day would be decided by it. Garbo stood at a train station cafe, wearing the crisp gray uniform of a German liaison officer. He held it perfectly, the posture, the silence, the slight arrogance. Around him, officers discussed troop movements, ammunition shortages, and rumors of an Allied invasion. None noticed him slip a coded message into a diplomatic courier bag bound directly for a high-ranking Nazi intelligence officer. The message claimed to be urgent. It was false. And it was brilliant. Because the soldier who wrote it, the calm-eyed man sipping bitter coffee, was secretly working for the British. A volunteer spy. A man who created so many fake agents across Europe that the Germans believed he controlled an entire invisible network. But Garbo didn't work alone today. A shadow moved behind him, a German officer he had seen twice in the past week, too many times. The man's eyes lingered on Garbo's uniform, then on his briefcase. Suspicion sharpened the air like a blade. Garbo did not flinch. He knew that the smallest crack, the tiniest stumble, could end his mission and his life. He stepped away from the cafe, passing through a corridor of soldiers. He felt the officer's gaze burning into his back. The wrong step now would destroy everything. The success of the greatest Allied deception depended on his ability to vanish into the crowd. Yet the risk did not end there. Garbo's coded message would travel straight to one of Hitler's most trusted intelligence analysts. If the lie worked, German divisions would be repositioned hundreds of kilometers away from Normandy. If it failed, the Allies would be marching into a slaughter. The world did not know it, but the first move of D-Day had already been played, by a man standing alone in Berlin, surrounded by enemies, holding nothing but forged papers and an outrageous level of courage. Garbo glanced once more over his shoulder. The officer was following him. The mission he had prepared for months was seconds from collapsing. And Chapter 1 ends here. Garbo's life was a ledger of small lies that added up to something enormous. After that cafe scene, Juan Pujol Garcia slipped back into the anonymity of city life, with the ease of a man used to folding himself into corners. He had graduated from petty forgeries and marginal contacts to something far more delicate, a living fiction so textured the enemy would stop suspecting deception and begin relying on it. He invented names, voices, entire battalions of agents who did not exist. Each agent had a dossier, a handwriting sample, a string of believable gossip, a hobby, a daughter's name, little human grains that made fiction feel like flesh. He mailed their reports, sent coded radio transmissions, and cultivated a relationship with aware officers who, bafflingly, began to trust him. Trust is earned in tiny increments. Garbo earned it by being exactly what they expected: cautious, dedicated, sometimes boastful enough to be credible. He fed them scraps of truth, troop movements that actually happened, whether reports that matched reality, then wrapped those truths in a cocoon of lies about timing and intent. He learned the psychology of the desk-bound colonels reading his messages, flattery for their analytical vanity, the occasional plausible error to make his work seem human. Above all, he learned to be boring. The best lies are the ones that look like routine paperwork. But being trusted by your enemy is a dangerous intimacy. A mid-level aware analyst started to ask questions. Who were Garbo's contacts in Britain? How did he receive confirmations? Why did some of his minor agents never come back with tangible evidence? Suspicion is a small, sharp pestilence. It crept into reports and then into an officer's private notes. For the first time, Garbo felt the cold finger of exposure. He responded the only way he could, by improvising authenticity. He created a new agent on paper, a retired petty officer in the Royal Navy with grievances and a plausible route into Channel defenses. He planted details in local newspapers that his fictional messenger would see and report back. He even arranged that British radio traffic, the real thing, monitored by German ears, would contain phrases Garbo claimed to have heard in secret briefings. It was a dangerous choreography. One misstep and the whole construction would collapse. One afternoon, while waiting in a dimly lit hotel lobby, Garbo watched a man approach who did not belong to the theater of polite suspicion. The man's uniform was new and sharp, his gait businesslike. He carried himself like a man who had been sent to measure a lyre and found the rhythm familiar. The abwehr had decided to test him directly. The encounter was not an interrogation so much as a smell test. Informal questions, probing remarks, a watchful smile. Juan's heart beat with the careful restraint of a gambler. He spoke slowly, laid out a tack of mundane details, and when pressed, produced a flimsy but convincing scrap, an intercepted note, plausibly traced to a British quartermaster. The officer's eyes narrowed. He asked for proof. Garbo gave him a half-truth and a promise of more. He promised, crucially, to show his correspondent's handwriting in a later dispatch. The officer left with a face that did not betray conviction. That night Garbo did what no single man should be asked to do. He built corroboration out of emptiness. He phoned an old contact and arranged for a friendly merchant ship to make a deliberately visible detour along the French coast. He convinced a petty clerk in a Lisbon shipping office to mention a fabricated convoy in a transatlantic telegram. He planted a small, controlled leak in British intelligence, nothing of value, but enough to make German analysts nod. The trick was to offer them something their biases would accept, a tidy explanation that fit their worst fears. Each planted detail was a vote of confidence. The abwehr analysts began to treat Garbo's messages as a thread they could pull. Each new pull promised more fabric. Unwittingly, they built a narrative that painted Norman beaches as a diversion and the real target as Pas de Calais, the smokescreen the Allies needed. Garbo sat alone in a cheap boarding house, hands stained with cigarette ash and ink. He had just drafted the next report, the one that would push the Germans further down the wrong path. The pen hovered. If he stopped now, suspicion might take root again. If he continued, he would be complicit in moving thousands of men to their deaths or to safety, depending on the gambit's success. Outside, the city continued. Inside, Garbo inhaled, steadied his hand, and sent another message into the dark. A small, precise falsehood that would oblige Berlin to believe and, crucially, to act. The web of shadows tightened. One more thread and the trap would be set. The message that would change the fate of Europe was transmitted at dawn. Garbo sat hunched over a radio set disguised inside an ordinary wooden trunk. Rain tapped against the window of his Berlin safe house, soft, steady, almost ceremonial. He sent the coded report with the calm of a man stirring a quiet river, though he knew he was unleashing a tidal wave across the German command structure. The message declared that the coming Allied invasion of France was not aimed at Normandy. It insisted, calmly, confidently, reliably, that the real attack would strike at Pas de Calais. The lie was perfect because Garbo didn't present it as a dramatic revelation. No, he slipped it in as if it were routine intelligence from his network of fictional agents. A casual detail, a mere confirmation of what German generals already feared. Within hours, the Abwehr decoded it. Within a day, the message was laid on the desk of Hitler's senior intelligence officers. Within a week, entire divisions were repositioned. Garbo kept feeding them what they wanted to believe, building a towering false narrative that the Germans mistook for clarity. His reward from Berlin was praise, more praise than any real soldier ever earned for genuine service. They even awarded him the Iron Cross, unaware they were decorating a man who was working tirelessly to destroy them. Then came June 6, 1944, D-Day. At 6:30 a.m., Allied soldiers stormed the Normandy beaches under fire hotter than hell itself. Chaos, smoke, metal bodies. The world shuddered under the weight of the invasion. And the Germans waited. They waited because Garbo had told them that Normandy was just a distraction. They believed that the real attack on Pas de Calais was still coming. So they held back 150,000 troops, keeping elite divisions idle while the Allies fought tooth and bone to secure the beaches. Reinforcements that could have driven the Allies into the sea never came. Hitler himself ordered, "Do not send the Calais forces. The main attack is still ahead." Hours turned into days. The second invasion never came. And by the time German commanders realized they had been deceived, the Allies had already broken through Normandy's defenses and begun their march toward Paris. Garbo's lie, crafted in dim rooms, whispered into radios, disguised within ordinary reports, had become one of the most decisive acts of psychological warfare in history. Aftermath. Garbo's success was so complete, so terrifyingly effective, that he became the only man in history to be decorated by both sides of a world war, Germany's Iron Cross and Britain's MBE, without ever firing a single bullet. When the war ended, he disappeared. He staged his own death, fled Europe under a false identity, and lived quietly in Venezuela for decades. Not even his family knew the full story until years later. Historians would later say that Juan Pujol Garcia, the man the Germans trusted more than their own generals, had saved tens of thousands of lives. All with nothing more than a typewriter, a radio, and a genius for deception.